you might not know it, but wool can actually be used as a nappy cover. It's waterproof, it's breathable, it's wonderfully soft and all natural, and one of my favourite ways to use cloth nappies. And today I'm going to tell you all about it and how you can make it work for you. Hello everyone, welcome back to Abodery. My name is Ines and I love to share our natural handmade lifestyle here in the UK. And today I'm going to share an aspect of cloth nappies that is one of my all-time favourites. It's something that is a little bit unusual, sometimes a little bit daunting, but once you've got the hang of it, absolutely wonderful. And that is wool nappy wraps. Seems a little bit counterintuitive that wool would be waterproof, but it is, and along with that it's got lots of wonderful properties. So we're going to start off talking about how wool nappy wraps actually work, and then we'll move on to how you can get them and how you can make them work for you. So firstly, how do wool wraps work? Well, if you think about a sheep, which is where the wool originally came from, obviously the wool on the sheep is waterproof, and that's because it has a natural oil in it called lanolin. So when you buy wool jumpers or perhaps wool for knitting in the shops, it's had the lanolin stripped off it, so it's no longer water repellent. So if we want to use wool wraps to cover our nappies, then all we need to do is add the lanolin back in by a simple process called lanolizing, and I will talk a little bit more about that later on. So wool isn't actually waterproof in the same way that a waterproof raincoat is, for example. It's just water repellent enough that it can repel most of the moisture back into the nappy on the inside. Wool is also breathable, so it allows a lot of the moisture from the nappy to evaporate through the wool cover. So this is actually a great way to keep baby a little bit drier, perhaps at night. So it's the combination of being just about repellent enough as well as allowing the moisture to evaporate that together creates this really good waterproof-like quality. Because of that breathable aspect of the cover being a key part of how it operates, it's really important to put loose-fitting, breathable clothes over the top of your wool wraps. If you have anything that kind of presses or that is tight-fitting or perhaps is not breathable, I don't know, perhaps a very thick polyester over the top, then that's going to stop the moisture from being able to evaporate out, and it's going to be more likely to cause leaks. So why do people use wool nappy wraps? Well, there's loads of reasons, but I'm just going to talk you through a few of my favourite reasons now. Firstly, they're biodegradable. If you're using cloth nappies for environmental reasons, then you probably care about the amount of plastic you're using. Obviously, most cloth nappies do have plastic covers, which is not the worst thing in the world because you're reusing them over and over again. But if you care about reducing your plastic consumption and you would like to try something that's plastic free, then wool covers are pretty much the only plastic free option that's out there. Secondly, they're all natural. Some parents really care about having only natural fibres against their baby's skin, and if that's you, then wool is definitely the best option. Thirdly, they're breathable, so if you want to make sure that little one is keeping nice and dry, then having a wool wrap is one of the ways that you can have a drier nappy environment than perhaps otherwise. It's not going to keep your baby completely dry, but it's one way that you can help them to stay feeling a bit fresh. Number 4 is that they need washing very rarely. Wool is actually naturally antimicrobial and antibacterial, especially if it's been lanolized. So if you want to reduce the amount of nappies that you're washing, then introducing some wool wraps is a great way to do that. Most people will find once their wool nappy wraps are a couple of months old, they'll only need to wash them maybe every 2 to 3 months. Other than that, all you need to do is leave them out to air dry and they'll just kind of naturally refresh themselves. It's quite amazing actually. Number 5 is that wool is thermoregulating. So that means that it will keep your baby warm in winter and cool in the summer, which is just wonderful, especially when you're wanting to avoid putting heating on, or perhaps when you live in a hot climate and want something really fresh and breathable for your baby. So there are lots of benefits to wool, but there are of course also some downsides. One downside is that wool is obviously not vegan. So if you're living a vegan lifestyle and you want to avoid all animal products, then of course wool is not going to be available to you as an option. Secondly, there are also potentially some ethical issues with wool. Here in the UK and across most of Europe, I believe that unethical mulesing practices are banned, so almost all wool that's available here should be ethically sourced. But if you live elsewhere in the world and you want to try wool wraps, then it's worth looking out for wool that is not from mules to sheep. Mulesing is just a process that's done to some sheep, which is now considered to be unethical. If you want to know more about it, then you can go and look it up. But as I say, as far as I'm aware, in the UK, most wool should now be produced ethically. Another downside is that wool nappy covers are often fairly bulky, especially compared to their kind of plastic counterparts. This might not be a downside for you, but for some people it really matters. You know, they don't want baby to be overwhelmed by a big nappy cover. If this is you, you might want to consider going for one of the slimmer wool nappy options. There are some out there. They're a little bit more expensive than the bulkier ones, but they're available if you've got the budget. You might also want to consider just keeping wool nappy wraps for nighttime. They're a really great nighttime option, and if you use them at nighttime, then it matters less, I think, how bulky they are. Some people also like to use wool longies, so this is essentially where the nappy wrap is trousers. And obviously that avoids the problem of the wrap being bulky, because you're not then having to put another layer of clothing over the top. So that's a really great option, especially during the winter. One thing to mention is that people often think that the care of wool nappy wraps is a downside. So often people are intimidated by the process of washing and lanolizing wool. I don't think this should be a downside. Honestly, the process is really straightforward. I'm going to talk you through it a little later on. So if the care process is the only thing putting you off trying wool, then I would just give it a go. See how you get on with it, and you'll probably find that it's easier than you thought. So hopefully I've convinced you to try a wool nappy wrap, and now you're wondering where you can get one from. And there are two ways to do this. Firstly, you can obviously make your own wool nappy wrap, and secondly, you can buy one ready-made off the shelf. If you'd like to make one, then the most obvious way to do it is to knit one. All you need to do this is a pattern, and I will link my favourite down in the bottom. It's from a lady who runs a company called Little Pants. She's got patterns for soakers, so just sort of pants, and also longies, so long trousers, and she's also got both Aran weight and DK weight patterns if you prefer to knit with a certain weight of wool. If you're knitting your own, one thing to be aware of is that you need to make sure your yarn is 100% wool, and it can't be superwash. Superwash is just where the wool has been treated so that you can wash it in the washing machine, but that treatment prevents the wool from taking the lanolin, so it's really important that you get 100% untreated wool yarn to knit your nappy covers in. You can also sew wool nappy covers if you've got an old 100% wool jumper, or you can find some 100% wool fabric, then you can definitely sew your own. This isn't something I've ever done, but there are loads of sewing patterns on Etsy if you wanted to have a look at those. If you prefer to buy a wool wrap, then there are a whole range of brands out there, and there seem to be more coming every week. Some of my favourites are Desana, Puppy and a Navy. There are others out there, but those are my three all-time favourites. Desana make really reliable double layer thick wool shorts and trousers. They are bulky, but they're also really reliable and very comfortable, so these are a great option for nighttime. Desana also make longies, so they make the trousers that you can wear almost as clothing as long as you've lanolized them. A Navy make both kind of short versions as well as slightly slimmer versions that look like a standard nappy wrap with poppers and things. So if you're looking for a slimmer option, then a Navy does have one of those. Finally, Puppy is my favourite nappy wrap brand. The wool covers that they make are very slim fitting for a wool cover, but the downside is that they're also really expensive. So if you're looking for something slim fitting, then take a look at Puppy, but just be prepared to spend quite a bit. So let's say you've bought your wool nappy wrap and now you're wondering how to care for it. Like I said earlier, most times when you come to change your baby, you can just remove the wool wrap, turn it inside out and leave it to air. And you should find when you return to it a few hours later that it's dry, and crucially that it doesn't smell of wee anymore. It's kind of magic, but it's the way that wool works. And as long as it doesn't smell of wee, you know that it can be used again, that it's nice and fresh. If it does smell of wee, then you need to wash it. And the way to do that is to hand wash with a small amount of wool detergent. It is possible to wash wool nappy wraps in the washing machine. I do it fairly regularly, but they do felt much easier. So if you care about making sure that yours don't felt, then it's definitely worth sticking to hand washing. To hand wash your nappy wraps, all you need to do is add a little bit of wool detergent to a bucket or bowl of lukewarm water, and then just very gently submerge the nappy wraps into the water. Don't squeeze or rub them because that agitation will cause the nappy wrap to felt, but just very gently kind of submerge and let go, and then just leave it to soak, and the detergent will draw out any of the bacteria from the nappy wrap. Of course, I should say you should always wash your nappy wrap if there's any poo on it. Hopefully that goes without saying. It's also a good idea to make sure you wash any poo off really quickly because wool tends to stain really easily. When you've washed your nappy wrap, just remove it from the water and roll it up inside a tea towel or a towel. Just gently press down to remove the excess water, and then you're ready to move on to the lanolizing step. So to lanolise your nappy wraps, you'll need some solid lanolin. This is pretty abundant, loads of places sell it, but I will leave my favourite again down in the description box. You'll need a pea-sized amount per nappy wrap, and then also a teaspoon of wool detergent, and you want to put both of those things inside a mug and then top the mug up with boiling water. Give all of that a stir, and the water should gradually start to turn milky, which shows you that the lanolin has emulsified into the water and will spread nice and evenly across your nappy wraps. Then take a separate bowl of cold water and pour your lanolized water into the bowl. Then give that another stir and just check with your finger that the water is no warmer than body temperature, ideally a tiny bit colder. Like I said earlier, heat and agitation can felt your nappy covers, so it's really important that the water isn't hotter than body temperature. Then take your nappy wraps and again just gently submerge them into the lanolized water, and then you want to leave them at least half an hour, but I mean up to overnight. I often leave mine overnight by accident and it's never done them any harm. And once you've left them to soak, again just lift them out, roll them gently inside a towel to remove the excess water, and to dry them just lay them flat onto the ground, reshape them into the right shape of a nappy wrap, and then leave them to dry. You can find out more about wool nappy covers over on my Instagram, which I will leave here, and I also share quite a lot on my blog. If you would like to head over there, it's abodery.co.uk. Otherwise, I will see you all next time. Bye!